Imagine waking up to a full-blown wedding in your backyard, wedding dress, three-tiered cake, and an insane neighbor barking orders like she owned my life. But did she think I'd just sit quietly? No. I turned her happily ever after into a nightmare Pinewood Estates will never forget. Want to know how? Stick around. My name is Richard Parker, and I live in Pinewood Estates, a peaceful neighborhood, or at least it was, until that fateful morning flipped my life upside down. I was in the middle of my sacred Saturday sleep, dreaming of the perfect barbecue, ribs cooked just right, ice-cold beer, the smell of charcoal in the air, when I was jolted out of peace by an infernal racket. Chairs being dragged like someone was assembling a furniture army, and a shrill voice screeching, "Where's the bouquet? Don't make me go looking for the bouquet." I rolled out of bed, still groggy, my heart racing like I'd missed the Super Bowl's final play. I yanked the curtains open, expecting to see, I don't know, a raccoon rummaging through my trash or the neighbor mowing his lawn too early again. But what did I see? My backyard, my pristine lawn sanctuary, the stage of legendary barbecues, where I'd been crowned the Grill King, had turned into a bridal magazine cover overnight. A rose-covered arch stood there, crooked but imposing, like it had sprouted from the ground. A sweaty DJ was setting up speakers that looked ready to blast my tranquility into a million pieces, and a catering van, with "Dream Food" scrawled in giant letters, was parked in my driveway, crushing my tool cart against the wall. I blinked about 10 times, thinking I was trapped in some weird pepperoni pizza-induced dream from the night before. I rubbed my eyes, pinched my arm. It hurt like hell, and nothing changed. It was real. My brain was still processing when movement in the corner of the yard caught my eye, and then I saw her, Linda Harris, the neighborhood tyrant, the uncrowned Queen of Pinewood Estates, marching across my lawn like it was her personal garden. Dressed in a hot pink pantsuit that screamed, "I'm in charge," she was pointing orders at a team of terrified assistants, clutching a megaphone she didn't even need. Her voice was already a weapon of mass destruction. Faster with, "Those chairs, Gerald. And where's the bouquet? If I have to ask again, someone's missing dessert," she bellowed, while a poor intern-looking guy ran around hauling a floral arrangement that seemed heavier than he was. I stood there, jaw dropped, still in my taco print pajamas, a gift from my sister, don't judge me, trying to figure out how my backyard had become the HQ for a surprise wedding. And worse, I hadn't been invited to the party, but apparently I was the host. I was livid. My blood boiled so fast I could almost smell smoke pouring out of my ears. I threw an old coat over my pajamas, the taco print now feeling like a mocking shout of irony, and slipped on some worn-out flip-flops, ready for war. I stormed out the back door, the cold ground biting my feet, and marched straight up to her. "Linda, what the hell is going on here?" I snapped, my voice raspy from no coffee and zero patience for this absurdity. She spun toward me with the speed of a hawk spotting prey, and there it was, that fake smile, so rehearsed I could see the Botox creases struggling to hold it together. "Oh, Richard, good morning," she chirped, like I'd just strolled in for afternoon tea. "It's my niece Emily's wedding. Your backyard is perfect for this. You saw the HOA notice, right?" Her tone was so sugary I could almost feel it sticking to my teeth, but the venom underneath was unmistakable. "Notice? What notice?" I shot back, already feeling the ground quake under me. And it wasn't the DJ's subwoofer. I didn't authorize anything. My backyard isn't a party hall for your family, Linda. My voice climbed 2 octaves, and I gestured at the chaos around me like a courtroom lawyer presenting ironclad evidence. A guy in a tuxedo, clearly lost, was stumbling through my newly planted hydrangeas, leaving a trail of crushed petals. On the other side, a bridesmaid in a lime green dress posed on my deck, pouting for a selfie while balancing a mimosa I knew didn't come from my fridge. Linda didn't even flinch. She gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder, a move that made me fantasize for one glorious second about tossing her into the chocolate fountain they were setting up near my grill. "Relax, Richard," she said, like I was some stubborn dog barking at nothing. "This is a Pinewood Estates community event. You should be proud." Proud. Proud. My brain short-circuited for a moment, torn between laughing at her audacity or running for the hose to chase everyone out like a slapstick comedy scene. As I processed, a waiter zipped by with a tray of canapes, breaded shrimp by the smell, and nearly dumped it all on my chest. "Watch it, man," he yelled, like I was the intruder in my own home. Behind him, the DJ tested the sound, and a blast of Sweet Caroline made my window panes rattle. The bridesmaid on the deck squealed, "I love this song," and started dancing, spilling half her mimosa on the boards I'd sanded and varnished with my own hands. I glared at Linda, who was now ordering a florist to adjust the rose arch, and it hit me. This wasn't just a wedding, it was an invasion. And I needed a plan, fast, before my backyard became the permanent stage for the Harris family's madness. Linda stepped forward, her heel sinking into my grass, like a stake claiming conquered territory. She got closer, too close, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, a nauseating mix of lavender and arrogance. Then she whispered, in a tone that was half threat, half promise from someone who'd already won the war before firing a shot. "Look, Richard, don't make this difficult. Want a fine for poorly maintained lawn? Or maybe for disturbing neighborhood harmony? I run Pinewood Estates, and you know it." Her smile was a razor's edge, and her eyes gleamed, with the certainty of someone holding all the cards, or in her case the HOA rulebook, printed in gold letters. My blood surged, rushing up my throat and nearly erupting in a primal scream that would have made the DJ drop his headphones and bolt. She was blackmailing me, on my own property, in my backyard where I'd planted every hydrangea with first-time parent care, where I'd spent hours aligning the walkway stones to perfection. This wasn't just an insult, it was an outrage, a velvet-gloved hot pink slap in the face, as she strutted off, already yelling at someone to straighten the tablecloths for God's sake. I stood there, rooted like a furious statue, my poorly buttoned coat trembling with my heavy breathing. That's when it hit me, like a lightning bolt slicing the sky before a storm. It wasn't just a wedding. It wasn't just Emily and her missing bouquet. It was a power play. Linda Harris didn't just want my backyard. She wanted to crush me, turn me into a living example of what happens to anyone who dares cross her, and lives to tell the tale. I could see it in her eyes. She was already picturing my name scribbled on petty fines, my Grill King reputation reduced to the guy who let Linda run the show. But she made a fatal mistake. She underestimated Richard Parker. While she set up her circus, the Rose Arch now lopsided, the DJ blasting a remixed canon in D that sounded like a crime against music, and a battalion of waiters tripping over my plants, I started plotting my revenge. My brain was spinning faster than the cotton candy machine they'd shoved into the corner of my deck. I wasn't going to let her win. Not in my house, not on my turf. If Linda wanted war, she'd get war, but on my terms. First, I needed allies. Second, I needed evidence. And third, I needed to turn this wedding into a chaos so epic that even the Pinewood Estates HOA would have to give me a medal, not a fine. I needed something big, something that would blow Linda's niece's wedding into 1,000 pink pieces without landing me in a cell on charges of disturbing the peace, or worse, assault with matrimonial intent. My backyard was under siege, and I wasn't going to win this war with shouts or threats. I needed a secret weapon, something to take on Linda's empire of Tool and Champagne head-on. That's when, in a flash of genius or maybe desperation, my eyes locked onto the irrigation system control box, half hidden behind the lavender bush I'd never managed to get blooming right. That system was a relic, installed by the house's previous owners. Old rusty pipes I'd never bothered fixing because, well, I'm the Grill King, not the plumbing lord. But now I remembered what came out of those sprinklers the one time I tested it years ago. Stinking brown water with a smell that mixed forgotten swamp, wet sock, and divine retribution. It was a toxic brew that had been sitting there, fermenting, in the pipes like a sleeping monster, just waiting for its moment to be unleashed. And that moment had arrived. I almost laughed out loud, a half-manic cackle that made the bridesmaid on the deck shoot me a weird look before going back to her selfies. She wanted a dream wedding. I'd give her an unforgettable nightmare, one that'd wilt the bouquet, choke the DJ, and send Linda Harris screaming to the one place she couldn't control, out of Pinewood Estates. I bolted to the garage, dodging a waiter balancing a tower of champagne flutes like a circus juggler, and grabbed my screwdriver. The plan was simple: turn on the system, crank the pressure to maximum destruction, and let nature, or rather rot, do the rest. The day got crazier, like my backyard had become the epicenter of a disastrous wedding reality show. Suddenly, about 80 guests showed up, a sea of expensive suits, silk dresses, and shiny shoes, clearly unprepared for the soft ground of my lawn. The white folding chairs, the fancy kind Linda must have rented to impress, were slowly sinking into the dirt, creating a comical scene of people trying to balance while clutching their sparkling wine. The groom, some guy named Josh, was a tall, awkward dude who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, probably playing video games or fleeing the mother-in-law he didn't even know came with the deal. He stood there, lost, fiddling with his phone while Linda buzzed around like a hurricane in a pink pantsuit. I grabbed my phone, still grimy from messing with the pipes, and called Mike, my longtime buddy, and one of the few people in Pinewood Estates with a shred of common sense. Left. Mike, how'd she pull this off? How'd this lunatic take over my backyard like this? I asked, keeping my voice low as I spied on the circus through the kitchen window. He let out a dry laugh on the other end, like he already knew the bomb he was about to drop. Man, she forged the HOA approval, told everyone you handed over your yard willingly like some gift to the neighborhood. And get this, I heard she siphoned the HOA budget to pay for this wedding. It was supposed to be a simple event in the community hall, plastic chairs, a grocery store cake, that kind of thing. But Linda wanted to show off, turned it into a luxury carnival with our money. I nearly dropped the phone. Siphoned money? So she stole from Pinewood Estates to fund this circus, I repeated, feeling a wave of rage mixed with an almost sadistic glee. This was ammo. No, a missile. Linda Harris, the untouchable tyrant, had slipped up big time, and I was holding proof she wasn't just an insufferable control freak, but an outright thief. My brain started piecing it together. The irrigation system would be the opening strike, a liquid chaos to throw the enemy off balance. But now I had something bigger, a chance to expose her to the whole neighborhood. It was 4 p.m., the sun still, pounding the backyard like an unrelenting judge. The ceremony was starting, and the air carried that sweet scent of anticipation mixed with sunscreen and pricey perfume. Linda, the self-appointed officiant, stood at the front, balancing a professional smile while waving to the guests like she was the neighborhood queen. She wore an impeccable beige dress, at least for now, and a bun so tight it seemed to hold her thoughts in place. Meanwhile, Emily, the bride, was getting ready for the aisle, adjusting her veil with trembling, nervous fingers and clutching a bouquet of lilies that shook like it knew what was coming. The DJ, some guy with a backward cap, who clearly thought he was the star of the show, was playing a sappy tune, the kind that makes you want to hug someone or puke, depending on your mood. The guests were on their feet, some whispering, others snapping selfies with the 5-tiered cake gleaming in the sun like a sugar trophy. It was a work of art, decked with edible flowers and a bride and groom topper that looked ready to leap off a cliff. It was now or never. I was crouched behind the hedge, my heart pounding like a samba drum. I popped the irrigation control cover off with the delicacy of someone pulling a grenade pin. I turned the valve, and for a split second, the silence was broken only by a weird gurgle like the backyard had the hiccups. Then pow! The pipes erupted in a symphony of hydraulic chaos, spewing rancid water everywhere. It wasn't just water. It was a fetid cocktail of sulfur, iron, and what I swear smelled like the distilled despair of a forgotten swamp. The sprinklers, meant to sprinkle life, turned into geysers of sludge, spitting destruction ingloriously. Disgusting jets. The white chairs turned into an instant swamp, sinking into the muck like they'd given up on life. The flower arch, all decked out with roses and ribbons, swayed dramatically before collapsing with a splash worthy of an action movie. The DJ jumped, tripping over his own cables to save his gear, but it was too late. The soundboard was sparking as he yelled something about "my playlist." Linda, poor thing, took a jet right to the face, her beige dress turning a tragic brown in seconds, her bun unraveling like a perfect metaphor for the day. Emily, in the aisle, let out a scream that mixed shock and fury. The train of her dress, once a princess veil, now a muddy soup dripping onto the ground with a melancholic plop-plop. The guests, pandemonium. There was an auntie trying to shield herself with her purse, an uncle laughing like it was the best day of his life, and a kid, who I swear started licking the mud off her arm before her mom yanked her away. The cake, the poor cake, held on for a few seconds, but then a sprinkler turned straight at it. The edible flowers slid off, and the bride and groom topper face-planted into the frosting, like they were saying, "We're done." It was the perfect wedding turning into a comedy of errors soap opera, and me, I just watched, valve still in hand, with a grin I couldn't hold back. Linda came stumbling toward me, her heels sinking into the mud like the ground was trying to swallow her. Whole. Her brown dress dripped, and her hair, now a drenched bird's nest, flopped as she screamed, "You ruined my niece's wedding, Richard! This is a crime! I'll sue you until you're a beggar on the street!" Her voice was a mix of hysterical, soprano and thunder, echoing through the yard like a human megaphone. Her eyes blazed with hatred, and a chunk of mud slid from her forehead to her nose. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I crossed my arms, standing there like a statue of someone who'd won the war before the battle even started. "Crime?" I shot back, raising an eyebrow. "This is my property, Linda, my yard, my rules. Looks like my irrigation system had a glitch. These things happen, you know. Maybe you should have rented a fancy air-conditioned venue instead of turning my lawn into a stage for your ego." I stepped back, just to dodge the mud she accidentally kicked up while flailing like a madwoman. She froze, pointing a trembling finger in my face, her chipped red nail polish looking like even her manicure was giving up. "You'll regret this. Richard, I'll fine you until you have to sell this house to pay the debts. I'll call the HOA, the cops, the FBI if I have to." Her face was red, veins popping on her forehead, and a stubborn sprinkler chose that exact moment to blast her back with mud, drawing a squeak that sent a bird flapping out of the nearest tree. I smiled, that slow, dangerous smile you save, for when you know you've got the upper hand. "Fine me with what, Linda? The money you siphoned from the HOA budget to cover your emergency fees no one's ever seen a receipt for? Because I think Pinewood Estates would love to hear about that, especially the finance committee, who, by the way, owe me a favor." I dropped the bombshell with the calm of someone ordering coffee, and the effect was instant. Her face went from red to a ghostly white, like I'd drained her color with an invisible hose. Her mouth opened and closed, fish out of water style, but no sound came out. The guests, who'd been busy trying to save their shoes and dignity, stopped dead. Phones popped up like magic, little recording lights blinking as they murmured, "She did what? HOA money?" I knew those new palm trees were suspicious. The guy in a grey suit with a tie screaming "retired accountant" even jotted something on a napkin, probably already calculating how much she owed. Emily, still in the aisle, dropped her bouquet into the mud and shrieked, "Aunt Linda, what do you mean?" The DJ, who'd given up on his gear and was now holding a phone to livestream, narrated under his breath, "Yo, folks, looks like we've got a plot twist at the wedding of the year." I stepped back, hands in my pockets, watching the circus catch fire. Linda looked around wide-eyed, like someone realizing the stage had collapsed and the crowd was booing. The valve still gurgled in the background, like it was applauding the chaos. It was the kind of moment you don't plan, but when it happens, you thank your lucky stars you're alive to see it. The wedding fell apart faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. Josh, the groom, stood still for about 5 seconds, staring at the scene like he was trying to figure out if this was a nightmare or a tacky reality show. The bouquet, which he'd been holding awkwardly, dropped into the mud with a sad ploft, and he just turned around, hands in the pockets of his soaked jacket. "I knew this family was nuts," he muttered, loud enough to echo across the yard. His voice had that tone of someone who'd had one foot out the door since the engagement, and now the mud just gave him the final push. He walked off, shoes squishing through the grass, straight to his car parked on the street without so much as a glance back. The roar of the engine was like a freedom soundtrack. Poor Emily collapsed into a sob that mixed anger, sadness, and a hint of relief she wouldn't admit yet. The dress, which hours earlier had been any bride's dream, now looked like an abstract painting of mud and tears. She leaned on a half-sunken chair, her veil dangling crookedly on her head like a white flag of surrender. "My life is over," she wailed, trying to wipe the mud off the bodice, only making it worse, of course, turning it into a brown paste that dripped down her hands. A cousin ran to help, but slipped and landed flat on her backside, letting out a scream that morphed into hysterical laughter from the few still hanging around Linda. In a fit of desperation, climbed onto a wobbly chair and shouted at the guests, "Stay put. This is just a hiccup. The party goes on." Her voice cracked on, "goes on," and a stubborn sprinkler answered by blasting one last jet of mud square in her chest. No one stayed. The guests were already bolting for their cars, some laughing, some cursing, and one uncle hauling a tray of canapes he'd clearly decided to rescue for home. The DJ, now without an audience, shut off the sound and started dismantling what was left of his setup, grumbling something about never doing outdoor gigs again. The cake, or what remained of it, fully collapsed, turning into a heap of cream and mud that one kid still tried to scoop up with his fingers before his mum dragged him off. Later, as I swept up the wreckage of my newly liberated backyard, Mike showed up, his face red from laughing so hard. He was the kind of neighbor who knew everything before anyone else. Pinewood Estates' human radar. "Richard, the HOA's in total meltdown," he said, leaning his bike against the fence. "They're investigating Linda for fraud. They think she pocketed 10 grand from the maintenance fund to pay for those ridiculous palm trees, and who knows what else. Pinewood's free of that high-heeled tyrant." He slapped my shoulder like I'd just won a Medal of Honor. I dropped the broom, looked at my yard, now a glorious battlefield, and smiled. "I took back my turf, dethroned the neighborhood queen, and taught a lesson that'll become legend around here. Moral of the story? Don't throw a wedding in the yard of someone who knows where the pipes are buried. And more importantly, don't mess with the guy holding the valve." The sun was setting, painting the sky orange, and the sprinklers gurgling finally stopped, like the yard was giving me a nod of approval. Pinewood Estates would never be the same. And me? I was ready for a beer, and a silence Linda could never interrupt again. Last week, Pinewood Estates became the stage for a quiet revolution. The HOA board, that little clique of tie-wearing wannabe rulers, got dissolved in an emergency meeting that felt more like a comedy courtroom. There was crying, yelling, and even some guy spilling coffee on the official minutes while trying to defend Linda. It didn't help. She's on borrowed time now, scrambling to sell her house before the audit digs into the books and uncovers the hole she dug. Word is, the imported palm trees were just the tip of the iceberg, and there's even a scam involving fountains. That never got installed. The for sale sign out front is crooked and faded, like even the realtor's given up on her. And me. I'm soaking up my peace like it's a cold beer after a war. The yard's quiet. The pipes are fixed, by a pro this time to avoid more tsunamis, and the only sounds I hear now are the wind in the trees and the occasional bark from Mike's dog. It's the kind of victory that doesn't need a trophy, just a porch chair and a decent sunset. Pinewood Estates is breathing a sigh of relief, and I feel like the unlikely hero who toppled a tyranny with a valve and a crazy plan. If you enjoyed this madness, and I know you did, because who doesn't? Love a well-orchestrated chaos? Drop a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next stories, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone hijacked your backyard with a surprise wedding? I rained mud on the party, but maybe you've got an even wilder, or at least cleaner idea. Until next time, when I find out what else this nutty neighborhood has up its sleeve,